Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw.
Hello and welcome to the Halloween episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw 2022. I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
Todd, look, you know, when we were talking about what we wanted to do, last week we did Terrifier, which ultimately I really like. I do. It's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. It's a little bit gory and gross, but I do like it. But when we finished that, we said, let's do something a little lighter. For our final Halloween episode. And we polled our patrons on Patreon, and we didn't do a vote. We just asked, what are some suggestions? Somebody said, if you wanted to go light, you could do Hocus Pocus.
It's pretty light.
I know. And honestly, it's not like we've never thought about it before. For whatever reason, we just haven't done it.
You've brought it up.
I gotta tell you, I'm really, really excited to talk about this movie. I love this movie. I absolutely love it. We felt that based on the suggestion and the fact that the sequel finally 30 years later, 29 years later, came out this year, it was fitting that we finally tackle this very, very much Halloween-themed movie. What do you think?
I mean, it is 100% Halloween themed, and it's it's very family friendly. It's PG, and it's pretty notorious, I think, for people around our age and maybe even a slightly younger. We've even done theme months where we've done family-friendly horror movies. They're out there and they're fun. So this definitely qualifies as a horror movie, definitely qualifies as a Halloween movie, and it's certainly within the wheelhouse of the kind of thing we talk about. So, yeah, no, I think it was a great choice.
Me too.
Especially after the Terrifier, which is 180 degrees opposite kind of movie from this one. So
absolutely. But like you said, it is family friendly, and I think that it definitely falls under the category of gateway horror. Yeah. This is a movie that you can show your kids, but it has real horror elements to it. Mm-hmm. There are these evil witches whose prime goal is to kill and suck the life force out of children.
Which they do within the first 10 minutes.
Which they do, yeah. Right. The movie doesn't go out of its way to soften that. These witches want to kill people. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I'll talk about it more later, but I've seen the sequel, and I've seen Kathy Najimy in particular has been doing press for the sequel. She was reluctant to take on the movie because she was concerned about presenting an offensive stereotype for real life witches. Which, of course, there are. There are people who identify as witches and people who are Wiccan and whatnot. She took it because Bette Midler was her idol, and she absolutely could not pass up the opportunity to work with Bette Midler, and I don't blame her at all. I would feel the exact same way. But the movie started out as a concept. Disney wanted to do a Halloween-themed movie. I think one of the producers, and he's credited as a writer because he helped come up with the story, David Kirshner, he thought, there are all of these family-themed Christmas movies, and they're wildly successful, and they get, replayed every year and become traditions, but there are no real family Halloween movies. And so he came up with this idea. It was originally going to be Disney's House of Halloween, and it was intended to be much darker and scarier than the film that we ended up getting. It sat in production hell for 8 years until finally they got their stuff together. David Kirshner worked on it. He was probably best known at the time for writing An American Tail, which is another great family movie.
Goodness, that movie's good.
Oh, I love it. But he's also done some horror stuff. I think that he had something to do with Child's Play, I think.
Yeah, he produced at least the first 3 or 4. Oh, no, he's produced almost all of the Child's Plays, I think.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. And then Mick Garris was another writer. He also is a horror guy. gosh, I don't remember the stuff that he's done, but he's done other horror stuff. Neil Cuthbert was the other writer, and then Kenny Ortega was the director. Kenny Ortega is probably best known at this point for his work on the High School Musical franchise. But he had done some other stuff too.
Music videos, I think, before this.
Music videos. He's, I think, in pre-production on a remake of Dirty Dancing. I think that he had his hand in the live Hairspray production for television. So these guys have a lot of experience, and they finally got their stuff together. Initially, the movie was supposed to be centered much more on the witches, and they actually filmed it that way. There are a lot of scenes that were cut that focused more centrally on the witches. I know that there was a scene with Kathy Najimy in a grocery store. There was a scene where late in the movie, they're in a high school. There was a scene where Sarah Sanderson and Mary Sanderson push their sister Winnie into the swimming pool. There was a lot that ended up getting cut because when they had their cut of that version, they felt like it was too scary and it needed to be more family focused, and so they put a lot more attention on the kids. I would have been, or I still would be, very interested to see what it was intended to be, but ultimately I think that it turned out great. This is one of those movies that I feel like it's lightning in a bottle. They got the right people in it. You know, of course, the divine Bette Midler as Winifred Sanderson, Kathy Najimy as Mary, who she is just straight up hilarious in everything that she's in.
She's the Sister Act gal, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's how I know her. She was, I think, around this time too. She got really popular because
she did.
She was a feature player in Sister Act, and then you just started to see her in a ton of movies.
Right. And she's a character actress. She's funny. She's hilarious. You know, she was a heavy-set woman at the time. Today, she looks younger than she looked 30 years ago. She's more fit. She's beautiful. I mean, not that she's not beautiful in this movie. She is. And then a very young Sarah Jessica Parker was 23 years old when she made this movie.
Oh, man.
That
no
is
way.
crazy to
That
me.
is crazy.
Like, I was an infant when I was 23.
You were an infant when you were
And
you
of
still
course, I am a little bit. Of course, she went on to find huge success in Sex and the City and is a fashion icon today and is still working. You know, there's the Sex and the City spinoff and Just Like That she is producing and starring in, and she's wildly successful, but she's a child in this movie. And the three of them are just amazing. I read that the first choice for Winifred was Cloris Leachman, and Cloris Leachman is hilarious. Like, I'm sure she would have made a fantastic witch. Rosie O'Donnell was asked to play Mary, but she didn't want to play a scary witch. And Jennifer Lopez auditioned for the role of Sarah. That would have been a different movie. But we ended up with this amazing cast. And then Leonardo DiCaprio was set to play the young boy lead role of Max Dennison. He turned it down to star in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And he got a lot of really good response for his role in that movie. So
that was a good choice.
Probably the best choice for him. Plus, the kid in this movie who was a relative unknown, Omri Katz, and he did some other stuff. He, I think, led the cast of a TV show called Erie, Indiana, which was like a supernatural, spooky kind of show.
Did you ever watch that, by the way?
I watched like the first couple episodes, I think. I didn't get into it. I don't remember why. I mean, it's been so long ago. It's been almost 30 years ago. I don't remember why. Now he runs a weed business. Good for him.
Good for him. Yeah, now is the time, really. I mean,
that's right. I mean, I could get down with that guy. And then a tiny little baby Thora Birch as Dani, his little sister. Of course, she has, you know, she's an adult actress now, still working. She was actually asked to reprise her role in the sequel, but she couldn't because of scheduling issues, and she was disappointed. She wished that she had been able to, but she wasn't able to. And then Allison is played by Vanessa Shaw, of course. I mean, also very, very young, but she continues to act. She is stunningly beautiful. I mean, and I can't forget the guy who plays Billy Butcherson, played by Doug. I always want to get his name wrong. I always want to say Doug Bradley, but that's Doug Jones. That's Doug Jones. Doug Bradley's the Hellraiser guy. Doug Jones. I'm trying to keep my language appropriate because this is a kids movie and parents could listen to this with their kids.
Maybe kids will listen to this too.
Yeah. Right. Doug Jones is a bleeping legend. Yeah. This guy is amazing. He has been in countless movies, and if you saw him out of makeup, you would probably never recognize him because he is always in insane makeup and prosthetics. He's this super tall, very lanky guy who has the most amazing control of his body of anybody that I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays these wild character creature roles. At any time I see him announced in the cast of something, I am fascinated and drawn to whatever it is because he is always so good. One of the things that I remember him from, which probably isn't even one of his most memorable roles, but he was the lead gentleman in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode called Hush that was up for multiple Emmys and stuff because the premise of the show was these demons came to town and stole everybody's voices. So up until the last few minutes of the episode, the entire thing, there's no dialogue because nobody can talk. And he was fantastic. So scary in that movie. And he's great in this movie too. Yeah. Initially scary, but then sweet and endearing. I tell you what, bro, you're going to have to butt in at some point because I could talk about this movie all day.
Well, I'm curious if you actually saw this in the theaters because it didn't do well in the theaters.
No. And no, it didn't, and no, I didn't. And that's too bad.
I mean, it was 93. We were in high school, I guess, at this time. So,
yeah. I was a freshman in high school, and they released it in the summer. Their thought was kids won't be in school, so they can go see movies. But they released it in the summertime, which I think was a bad decision.
Yeah.
You know, this is a Halloween movie; it needs to be released in the fall. And I think it went up against some big movies. Maybe The Nightmare Before Christmas or Jurassic Park or something like that. It went up against some big movies, and it did not do well at all. It did really poorly, actually.
And I don't know, I guess I could kind of see why, and yet not. I mean, there are a lot of other movies like this that just go over like gangbusters right out the gate. I mean, it's like a madcap, zany, there's just action throughout it.
Yeah.
There's always stuff going on. It really just yanks you through the movie, basically. And I think either some people are for that and some people are like, ugh, it's another kids movie. It's one of these kind of wacky, zany kids movies type things. And since parents make the decisions of what they're going to bring their kids out to see, I don't think it really depends on whether the kids like the movie. I think it's more like, do the parents, are they interested enough to want to bring their kids to it and sit through it? And that's probably what tanked it, but then made it so popular on video afterwards. As once, it's a perfect movie to rent for kids and sit at home where you don't have to watch it if you don't want to.
Sure.
I'm not saying you wouldn't want to. I'm just saying, that just kind of ups the appeal. It's funny how the context of a movie kind of changes really your reception of it in some ways. So anyway, no, I also didn't watch it in the theater either. I was in high school. I wouldn't have gone to see an obvious kids movie like this. And I never saw it, believe it or not, on home video at home. I think the first time I saw this movie was really just a couple years ago.
Get out.
I'm not kidding you. And I don't even remember why. It was somebody else's suggestion or somebody else was already watching it. it was one of those kind of deals where, yeah, just somebody else said, oh, it's good, you should check it out, and I ended up watching it. So this is the second time I've seen it, but I don't have these strong childhood memories of it like you do. Although I do have strong childhood memories of pretty much all the performers in this movie, like you just ran through. So it was still a bit of a nostalgia trip in that way.
I cannot believe that you've only seen this movie twice. I've seen this movie twice so far this year. And I might watch it again.
So here you are as an adult still going back to this, huh?
Oh my gosh. I watched it with my sister when we were growing up every year because eventually it did get a following. It almost seems wrong to call it a cult following because it's not really cult.
Pretty mainstream.
It's mainstream. It's popular. It plays on TV every Halloween season. I watched it with my sister growing up, and now Alan and I watch it every year during Halloween season. And for some reason, there was one year in the past 2 or 3 years where we didn't get around to watching it, and we talked about it afterwards, and we actually talked about it again last night. Like, it felt wrong. Like, we felt like we had missed something, that we hadn't watched Hocus Pocus during October. Like we legitimately regretted it. I think that's another thing that makes this movie so good, is it so has a rewatch factor. Like,
True.
You can rewatch this movie over and over again. The jokes just hit. They're funny. They're silly. There's just so much to like. There are musical numbers. I mean, come on. And, I'm happy to roll my eyes at musical numbers in some things, but you've got these three women. Bette Midler is a diva and has been doing it for decades, and this is right in her wheelhouse.
Yeah,
this
really
is what she does. She said when she got the script, the reason that she was excited about it was because it gave her the opportunity to do what she loves most and what she thinks that she's the best at, which is physical comedy.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely true. She is hilarious.
Yeah.
And she is a character actress. She does this in her own act. If you're lucky enough to be able to see Miss Bette Midler in concert, which I have not, but if you are, except for on video, I've seen her on video. But she does this. She plays characters. She doesn't just get up and sing. She does bits, and they're funny. She has a hilarious character where she's a mermaid, but because she's a mermaid above water, she wheels herself around in a wheelchair. And it's hilarious. I mean, this is what she does. Sarah Jessica Parker has a history on Broadway. She starred as Annie on Broadway when she was a little tiny girl.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, so she's got all of this performance. I don't know as much about Mary's background, the actress that played her, but even just knowing what she's done, she is hilarious in Sister Act. She's one of the funniest parts of those movies. Mm-hmm. So these three women coming together, it's just magic. It's fantastic.
No pun intended. Yeah, it's
it's so good. All right, I'm getting out of breath.
I mean, we can run through the plot, but I will say that, like, for me, okay, I love kids movies. Don't get me wrong.
Same.
There are a lot of kids' movies I do go back and rewatch. I mean, I just saw Goonies again, just like last week. This is the kind of movie that is just, it's like a little too silly for me. It is everything you said it is. It is hilarious. It is madcap. It's got music and all that stuff. And for me, I'm not usually in the mood for this kind of movie again. I'll watch it once and I'll enjoy it, but to watch it again, I have to be completely honest with you. About halfway through it, I set it to play at 1.5 speed so I could get through it faster.
I hate you.
I know. Am I terrible?
Yes.
Well, it's just like, once it kicks off, you just know where it's going, and it just keeps going that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, it's just a bunch of kids being pursued by these crazy witches who do hijinks and silly things and fish out of water jokes and whatnot, but they're always in control, and they just cast spells on people and cause mayhem throughout the town while they're pursuing these 3 kids who have the magic spell book that they need to ensure that they remain alive in the 21st century. And then, or in this case, the 20th century. It's hard to believe, actually, this is a movie that's 20 years old because
30,
it doesn't feel like
30 years old.
Oh, gosh, it is. It's hard to believe because it doesn't feel like it at all. It feels like it could have been made yesterday. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right. Like, I texted you. I know you're with your family, so you probably didn't have time, but there was a 25th anniversary retrospective that Disney did, and it was silly, really. It was formatted kind of like an award show, and generally it was silly, but there were some little nuggets of interesting information because there were interviews with the actresses and whatnot. But at the very beginning, the hosts did a summary of the plot in 3 minutes.
Did it even take that long?
I don't even know if it took that long. And they really, it might even be worth you looking it up. I'll give you my Disney Plus password.
Oh, you're a sweetheart. Why don't you just announce your password here so that everybody...
No. Then I would get kicked out all the time.
That's true.
But, I mean, the plot is simple. I don't know the best way to go about this because... It would be very easy to roll through the plot, but there are so many great parts.
Yeah, you just kind of have... Here, let me summarize. Let me do the boring part.
Okay.
So it starts out in the early, 1600s, which is really pretty freaking early, considering it's like the dawn of America's existence. Right. But anyway, yeah, it's 1600s, and there are these 3 witches who have captured a girl named Emily. They've sucked her lifeblood out of her and mixed up this magic potion. They have this spell book that's bound in human skin and has a little eyeball on it that looks around and seems kind of a little sentient in a way.
Totally.
And that's where they get their potions and spells out of. And their goal is to live forever by sucking the lifeblood out of kids. But the mob shows up and her brother shows up. Eventually, they hang these witches, which is pretty dark for a Disney movie, really.
Yes.
It's not like they show them struggling, but the barrels get kicked out from under their feet and you see their feet dangling and they get hung. But not before Bette Midler's character, who's sort of like the lead ghost, or the lead witch, makes a curse on the whole town and says that they will return when a virgin comes and releases them from the ground. Now we're back to the future, which is our present day, 1993, and it's your typical new family comes into town. It's so typical, really. It's this boy and his little sister. The boy's name is Max, and his sister's name is Dani. He's like high school age, and she's like upper elementary, I would suppose.
Yeah,
like 8
sure.
or 9. And they move into town from L.A., and it's Salem, Massachusetts, so it's a bit rural. And immediately he's getting teased at school. Him particularly is just getting relentlessly teased. He meets a girl, blah, blah, blah. It's Halloween. They are out at Halloween, and this girl and him and Dani all end up together at her house. And for some reason, because it's been brought up at school, the legend of the Sanderson sisters, he decides, hey, let's go to the Sanderson sisters' house and check it out, basically, because it's Halloween. And they go. He, being a virgin, which is a joke they keep throwing in there for the older ones, I guess, lights the candle, the black flame candle, which is put together with the fat of a hangman or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Of course, that is all that was necessary to awake the witches. The witches awake, and they run off with the spell book before the witches can get to it. And the reason they do is because Emily's brother, the one who had come to save her, Emily was the girl who had died earlier, had been turned into a black cat by the witches. And so he's still around. He's immortal as well, and he's kind of the guardian over there.
And he can talk.
He can talk, and everything is talking. Black cat has just been hanging around this house for the last 300 years. And so he tells them, take the spell book. And like, what? You're a talking cat. Take the spell book. And they leave. And so now it just becomes a case where the witches are alive, but they know that once the sun rises, they're going to die again unless they can get that spell book and do the right potion that helps them to live forever and then start sucking all the lifeblood out of all the kids in town again. And so from here on out, and I'd say that's probably about a third of the way through the movie that all this goes down.
Yeah, probably.
The next 2/3 of the movie is just them pursuing the kids throughout the town. They've got the cat with them, and they're trying to hide the spell book, and they're going to all these different locations, and it's Halloween, so there's trick-or-treating, and there's Halloween parties. The witches are crashing, and the kids are crashing, and they're trying to get their parents' attention, and all that stuff. It's typical kids' movie stuff until finally there's a big showdown, and everything's fine. The witches explode and are banished, and it's all good. So,
right, and that is it. I mean, the story is so simple, but it feels almost sacrilegious to reduce it to that because it's so good. All right, so
yeah.
I'm going to focus on some things. The sisters, the three witches, the opening scene is great. It establishes that these are evil witches. We know exactly what they're going to do, and they do it. They kill that little girl.
Yeah,
she is
crazy.
dead.
Her head is down. It's not like they dwell on it. It's not like there's a moment of sadness. It's actually almost darker just how callously it's treated, really, in a way.
Like, when they give her the potion, like, her life force, like, emanates from her. It's like it's glowing in a haze around her, and they just suck it, like, they breathe it in, like, they inhale it. And then, you just see her sitting in the chair with her head down and her hair hanging over her face. So it's not, like, overly morbid or gross or anything, but the girl is dead. Like, they killed her.
And now she's just in the background while they're dancing around dead. It's kind of creepy.
Yes. And Bette Midler said that she based her performance on The Wicked Witch of the West and Angelica Houston's Grand High Witch in The Witches.
Oh, interesting.
Kathy Najimy, I just saw her last week on The View. She said that with this character, she had two motivations. One was to eat children. Two was to be Winnie's favorite. Because Winnie is obviously the oldest and like their leader. And so throughout the movie, Mary, Kathy Najimy, is constantly trying to cater to her and suck up to her. At one point, she says, "Do you want to hit me? Would that make you feel better?" Like, it's that kind of thing. But it's hilarious. And Sarah Jessica Parker is... Oh, gosh, I have to keep it friendly. Sarah Jessica Parker is the boy crazy one, like, and she's ditzy. She's super ditzy and super boy crazy. Like, anytime there are boys or men around, like, she is practically melting into the floor.
Brave little virgin who lit the candle, I'll be thy friend.
But she's also hilarious. She's so bubbly and, like, she's always bouncing, and her hair is long. And she, being 23, of course, I remember being 23. I didn't realize the beauty of being 23 at the time. But, man, like, you're just... you look the best you're ever going to look.
It's so true. Unless you're Sean Connery or something.
Right, sure. Sarah Jessica Parker is still stunningly beautiful today, but 23-year-olds, I mean, she's just absolutely gorgeous. I hope this isn't inappropriate for children, but sexy. She's like, and that's what they're going for.
Yeah.
Even in the costuming, they said, like, their costumes reflected their characters. She is styled to look like Sleeping Beauty. Mary is styled to look like a baker or a baker's wife because she's more homey. She also, Kathy Najimy, said that part of her inspiration was that her character was part bloodhound. She's the one that sniffs out the kids, and she even barks.
That's right.
She barks throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And when they were designing Bette's look, the costumer wanted it to... the costumer's inspiration was Bette Midler. She's got to be fun. Like, initially, the plan had been to have her be very dark, like in black and very serious. And the costumer said, "I don't think that's right. I think she needs to be sparkly and fun." And so director, producer, I don't know, went to Bette and said, "What do you think?" And Bette Midler was like, "I'm not wearing some black dress." So their characters are based, there's just thought behind it, and they're they're not stereotypical necessarily. I mean, they're stereotypical in that they are evil witches who want to eat kids. That's stereotypical. But their individual characters are interesting and unique. And in the beginning, you know, I love this stuff too. In the beginning, when we first meet them, when they are kind of like old crones. They're in heavy old lady makeup. And then after they suck out the life of that little girl, they're younger. I think Mary says, "We're young." And then Bette Midler turns around and looks in the mirror and says, "Well, younger."
Right.
But that's also something that's crazy. So Sarah Jessica Parker was in her 30s, or no, excuse me, 20s. I don't remember where Kathy Najimy was, but Bette Midler was already in her 40s or 50s, because now that the sequel has come out, Bette Midler is in her mid-70s. And I don't care if this is off topic. I have seen the sequel, and yes, you can tell that they're older, but these three women have some, I mean, I think they must be witches in real life.
They've got some magic potion.
Yeah, there's no way that they should look the way. I mean, it's crazy. They don't look much different than they did 30 years ago. It's wild.
It's nuts. Wow. I think there is something special, though. I mean, I don't know if we're all taking care of of ourselves better, or if healthcare is better, or we just stay out of the sun more. But, like, you know, what was a 70-year-old person, even when I was growing up in the 80s, looks nothing like a 70-year-old person now. Like, you know, my parents still look super young. My dad, some people still think my dad is my brother. It's really weird. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. Somebody needs to look into that.
It is weird. It does seem weird. And I don't know if it has to do with style or what, but like the Golden Girls, which remains one of my favorite shows, those women, when they were cast in that show, are the age that like J-Lo and Shakira are now.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Good way
I'm
of putting
dead
it.
serious.
It's hilarious, right? This show of spinster ladies in their 50s, you know, like trying to get on with the last few years of their life. And come on.
And like, I'm a big fan of Madonna, but I'm not going to say that she's aged as gracefully as some ladies, but she's my mom's age. Like, I wish that for our viewers, I could put up a picture of my mom, who is beautiful, and a picture of Madonna and say that they're the same age, because one of those two, I'll leave it to you to guess, one of those two doesn't realize she's in her mid-60s. But whatever. You can do whatever you want. You know, rock those, you know,
Those
lingerie outfits, whatever, well into your 70s. Be my guest. Live your best life. Yeah. Anyway, gosh, what else? The book is so reminiscent of the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
There are just so many, like you said before, about getting people into theaters. I think you're right. It has to kind of appeal to the adults who are going to have to go sit through it too. Or it should, I guess, in some way. Mm-hmm. But this one does. Like this,
there's stuff in here.
This movie wouldn't be made today. Not for this audience.
Yeah.
I don't think.
I think you're right.
And I say that, and before I had seen Hocus Pocus 2, I had read that they had made it less dark, and because it's a modern young audience, they have to treat differently. The second movie is very much in keeping with the first movie, and if you like the first movie, or like me love the first movie, you're gonna love the sequel too. I will be honest, the first 20-30 minutes I was like, oh, I don't know, this is really silly. Somehow I had blocked out in my mind that part one is really silly too.
Yeah. It's really silly.
It is silly. And once it got going, and once the three witches showed up, tonally, it is so in keeping with the original movie. And there are so many throwbacks to the original. Ultimately, I absolutely loved it. We've already watched it twice this season, too.
Wow.
And watching Hocus Pocus 1 yesterday for this podcast just made me want to watch it again.
In some ways, we are different people. But
oh, gosh. I love it so much. I just think it's so funny, but also so sweet.
It is.
And the second one really does a good job of keeping with themes. Some of the things that come up in part one that are throwaway lines end up being really essential in part two, and it just works super well. And of course, all the women look great. And the actresses have said that it just felt so comfortable, even 30 years later, 29 years later, just stepping back in to those characters.
Huh.
And I can't imagine, you and I act on occasion, you more so professionally than me these days, but that's something that I have never, and I'm sure will never experience, to not only take on a role, but to create a role.
Yeah, it's something original that's never been done before, right?
Originate a role, and then be able to step back into it 30 years later. That's wild. What an amazing experience. And it really seems like they were grateful. The sequel was in talks for years and years and years. And for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. And at one point, Disney was going to move forward with it as a made-for-TV movie without the original actresses. And I just thought that was such a terrible, terrible idea. Like, if that's what you're going to do, just leave it alone. Just don't. But that died, and then this sequel came to fruition, and I'm sure a lot of it for me is nostalgia, but I think that kids still like Hocus Pocus. It's one of those movies like Christmas Vacation or Elf, or even probably more like A Christmas Story. These older movies that they stand the test of time. Mm-hmm. The jokes still work. There's not much in this, aside from the fact that there's no reference to cell phones, that dates it.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
It feels like it could be today.
You'd never notice that this was, again, 30 years old. You're right. There's nothing in here that dates it. In fact, it doesn't have a cell phone problem, really. There's very little, I think, in this movie that could have ever been solved there's probably nothing in this movie that could have been solved by cell phones. So there's not even one of those issues with it, where anybody watching it today would be like, why don't they just call their parents or something like that?
Right. Well, they even answer that question well.
Yeah.
Max and Dani's parents are played by... Okay, so the dad is Dave. He's played by Charles Rocket, who is infamous for having dropped an F-bomb on Saturday Night Live when he was a cast member, and I think he got fired for it, if I remember correctly. But if you were watching television in the 80s, you will recognize this man. I know him from a movie that probably nobody else has seen, but there was a movie in the 80s called How I Got Into College, and I thought that movie was hilarious. I still use clips of it in my class. And then the mom, Jenny, is Stephanie Farricki, and she has been in a lot too, and I think that she continues to work, but I remember her as John Candy's wife from The Great Outdoors, which is one of my favorite movies. One of the funniest movies I've ever seen. And she's great in it. And she's not in this movie much, but when she is, she's cute and funny. Just everything about it I love.
He was in Dances with Wolves, Earth Girls Are Easy. He's been on a lot of movies, and also TV series like Voices, like in cartoons and things, as well as video games, which is... Yeah, this guy's been around.
Yeah,
they're cute. Like the parents are cute, and they're nice. They're just fun, nice little parents, and they're just going off to a Halloween party. I think that's what you were getting to.
Yeah,
so they're busy at the Halloween party, dancing up a storm, which is a pretty freaking awesome Halloween party. It's the town hall party, which I mean, they're getting. You know what? These LA parents, they know how to schmooze right when they arrive. You know, they're still unpacking their boxes, and already they're hobnobbing with people at the town hall Christmas party.
I love it. It's hilarious. And I don't. Who cares about jumping around spoilers, whatever? But they get a spell put on them that they have to dance all night. Everybody at the party does, or dance until they die or whatever. But at the very, very end, when the credits start rolling, you see them coming out. They're still like, especially the mom is like,
I put a spell on you.
I thought LA was a party town.
It's so funny. These people from LA, they come and this is their first experience in Salem, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Salem's rocks." So adorable.
Yeah.
That he dresses up as a vampire and she dresses up as Madonna with the cone bra and the high ponytail from the 90s. See, these are the things that date it. But even that, like, I feel like even that is iconic. I don't know if my high school kids would get it. They might. I don't know. That's some pretty iconic stuff. But even I think that they would at least know who Madonna is and wouldn't be surprised to see her in that kind of costume. So,
yeah.
Still, the relationship between Max and Dani is adorable. Big brother, little sister. I can never remember. Are your sisters younger or older than you?
Younger.
I thought so. So like...
Yeah, I totally get this. I think there's a slightly different dynamic when you're just two kids. So you just have one little sister. Whereas my two sisters, my sister,
Teamed
my
up.
oldest sister is like 3 years younger than me, and the others, they're just stair steps. So, they just play together, and they kind of have their own thing, and I was kind of my own thing. But I can see where if you were a brother and a sister relationship, you would have exactly the kind of relationship that is portrayed in here, with the older brother kind of taking care of the younger sister. And what I really like about this is the sister's personality. It could have not worked because sometimes it runs the risk of sounding too written and unreal, but somehow it's played well enough by Thora Birch that she sells it. This younger girl who's kind of got a bit of a fearlessness to her, really, that her older brother doesn't have. Maybe also because she's younger. And he's got more complicated relationships to navigate in high school, and he's a little more self-conscious, and she's not, maybe. But I love some of her lines in this, like she's the one who's kind of pushing him to get out. He wants to just sit at home during Halloween at the beginning because he doesn't want to go out and encounter those bullies again.
No way! This is my first time! I'll get lost! Besides, it's a full moon outside! The weirdos are out! Come on, Max. Couldn't you forget about being a cool teenager just for one night? Please? Come on, we used to have so much fun together trick-or-treating. Remember? It'll be like old times.
Yeah, well, the old days are dead.
It doesn't matter what you say. You're taking me.
Eventually, she just stands in the middle of the room and screams at the top of her lungs, "Mom!" This is real life when you are a brother and a sister. And I swear to God, if I hit my sister and she told on me, all hell would break loose. I was in so much trouble. Meanwhile, my sister is throwing scissors at me. I'm like dodging them, and they're sticking in the wall. I'm not kidding. This is a true story. But God forbid I defend myself.
Right.
I love that relationship. But it does. It reminds me of my little sister. But there's one part of this movie that I think is, I feel like they should have cut. It's a part where Max comes home and he's upset because he's just gotten pestered by these bullies and they stole his shoes, whatever. He goes up to his room. They live in a really awesome house, by the way. But he goes up to his room, and his little sister is hiding in the closet that has slatted doors, and he doesn't know that, of course. And then he lays down in his bed and starts thinking about the girl that he has a crush on. This scene could have gotten really awkward really fast.
It even felt slightly awkward as well, I'll have to say. Yeah.
Oh, boy. I was just thinking to myself at like 14, 15, like, I see where this is going.
Sister might have an eyeful there.
I'm glad she popped out when she did. But anyway, I love their relationship.
Their relationship's cute. And then they do go out trick-or-treating, and as soon as they step out the door, it's like these bullies are waiting for them by the curb and asking for their candy. And eventually, he just hands them a big bag of candy and walks by. He mouths off to them a little bit, but ultimately he just caves and gives them candy and walks on. And then his sister is super disappointed, and she says,
You should have punched him.
It would have killed me.
You used to have died like a man.
which, coming out of an 8-year-old's mouth to her little brother on the steps of somebody's house trick-or-treating is just hilarious.
I thought it was funny.
They do end up at the house of the girl that he was dreaming about, which looked like the Home Alone house from the outside. I wonder if it is.
I don't know. A lot of this was shot on backlots.
Yeah.
The fountain from Friends makes an appearance. Oh gosh, there are lots of other famous houses in this movie. You won't recognize them. I didn't recognize them. I read about it, but there are lots of famous locations.
I think the Home Alone house is an actual house in Chicago or something.
Yeah, it
so
is.
Maybe maybe it wasn't, but it looks a lot like it. And they go in, and when they notice it's the girl, he says, "Oh, Allison," and she goes, "Oh, Allison, this is the girl you were dreaming about or talking about." Everyone's dressed up in these like period costumes, like they've come off the set of Amadeus or whatever.
Right, they're all very fancy. Like she's like that's how they establish that her family is rich. Like they have a very fancy formal Halloween party.
Really
I love
silly.
the little girl. The little girl says something like, "Rich people, they'll probably make us drink cider and bob for apples." And then as soon as they get in there, Allison's like, "Want some cider?"
It's
hilarious.
Funny. And
but
then
yeah,
she said,
the costume thing, so funny.
By the way, Dani, I love your costume.
Thank you. I really like yours too. Of course, I couldn't wear anything like that because I don't have any. What do you call them, Max? Yabos? Max likes her yabos. In fact, he loves them.
Oh my God, that is such a little sister thing to do. I don't think my little sister would have gone that far, but maybe. If she was mad enough at me. It's adorable, but it's also adorable. Like, they bicker and fight sometimes, but then they always make up. And, like, it's super cute that they've got each other's backs. It is nostalgic for me. That's the kind of relationship I had with my sister when I was younger. We were a little bit closer in age, but it's very sweet. It reads as very real to me. Then they bring back the witches. They all do such a good job with their vocal acting. You know, they all have these affected voices, but they work, and they're very character driven, and they are cartoonish, but still menacing and scary.
They're here. I know they're here. But where are they? Sniff them out, Mary.
There. Oh, I can't. They've gone too far. I've lost them.
I'll have your guts for garters, girl! Confound you! Very well. We must outwit them. When Billy the Butcher gets here with my book, we should be ready for them.
Ready.
Sarah! Let us start collecting children.
Why?
Because, you great buffoon, we want to live forever. Not just until tomorrow. The more children's lives we spend, the longer we shall live.
Right. Let us fly.
Fly!
Wait, sisters. I have an idea. Since this promises to be a most dire and stressful evening, I suggest we form a calming circle.
I am calm!
Oh, sister, thou art not being honest with thyself, are we? Huh?
When I talked to you about this initially and said, you know, I read that the sequel toned it down so it's not as dark, your response was, I don't remember this being dark at all.
Yeah.
I think that it is. And I think that there are parts that could, for children, not for adults, but for children, could be legitimately scary. Just like many children are very frightened of the Wicked Witch from The Wizard of Oz. I don't look at that. I'm not scared, but I could understand how children would be. Just like my sister was terrified of the Gmork in The Neverending Story. Terrified. I think that this movie does have real horror elements. For us as adults and a horror fan, it seems very light. But for children, I could see how this could be genuinely frightening. But I think that they do a good job of balancing the frightening elements with the really funny and lighthearted elements.
Yeah.
So that it's not overwhelming.
It doesn't stay frightening for long in any one way because it's just moving at such a fast pace anyway. And then, like you said, it just jarringly, jumps between something that might be really frightening, but then something really silly is going to happen later.
Right.
I really debated. I thought this might be a good opportunity. This might be something I can sit down and watch with my son, who's now...
I wondered.
5.5. He's almost 6, and he's in some ways very advanced for his age in terms of his thinking and stuff. But it still surprises me, and I think this is probably true of all kids, especially really young kids. It still surprises me. You really never know what's going to affect them. You really never know what particular thing they're going to think is scary, whereas you can show them something that you think would be scary to them and they're not whatever, and then some random shadow on a wall or something like that is just utterly terrifying. And there's nothing so far that has really utterly terrified him. But I did show The Wizard of Oz to him about a year ago, and I thought that would be a good gateway. That would be good gateway horror for him, right? Show him The Wizard of Oz. And he was scared about the witch pretty relentlessly through it, but not enough that he ran screaming from the room. And every time he kind of wanted to turn it off, I very gently was like, well, we could turn it off, but I kind of want to watch a little bit more with you. More so as a dad, I wanted him to see it through to the end. I wanted to see what happens to the witch, so that there's a resolution, so he doesn't go to bed super scared about it. And I could just tell him, don't forget, the witch dies, the witch is gone, kind of thing at the end. And he has brought up The Wizard of Oz a lot. In fact, he is dressed up as a witch for Halloween last year, and he is going to be a witch again this year for Halloween. He insisted on it. We were gathering materials for his costume yesterday. So, I thought about watching this movie with him, but I remembered what you said to me, that it's got some dark moments, and so I didn't. And now that I watch it, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how he would have taken it. I think there's some things like the hanging that would have kind of gone over his head.
Sure.
Or maybe he would ask some questions about. And then there's some other things like maybe the zombie that pops up later, or...
Sure.
Just some little things that do happen, like when Bette Midler's character is using electricity to really shock the boy and he's on the floor and all that. I think that would bother him. But I do kind of wonder if that would, like I said, be tempered by the fact that the witches are so wacky.
Right.
It's hard to say at this age. So I guess if you've got a kid around 5 or 6 or younger, it's kind of up in the air, I think. It really depends on the personality of your child.
Yeah, it's a judgment call.
Probably anyone over that age, 7 or older, is probably just fine.
Yeah. It's interesting. I read that not in America. I don't think it's ever been censored in America, but in some other countries, when they would air it on television, they would cut stuff out. They would still have the hanging scene, but they would cut the part where you see their feet dangling. They cut everything that had to do with Billy Butcherson getting his head knocked off.
Right.
And some of these cuts led to confusion because it eliminated vital parts of the plot. Like, it didn't make sense. At the end, when Thora Birch is in a grave surrounded by salt, perfectly safe, the only reason that she's motivated to get out of it is because Billy gets his head chopped off and she's trying to help him get it back, and that's what makes her vulnerable. You cut that part of him losing his head and cut her crawling out of the grave to get it, you have no idea why she's out. Like, she was in a safe place. Why is she out?
Yeah.
I've read that these days they air it in its entirety with no cuts, but for a long time, with some pretty serious cuts, which seems weird. It's PG.
Yeah, it
and
is.
there's no gore. None.
No,
Zero
no
gore. The zombie looks fantastic. Like, just a great character design.
A little comical. It's not like his skin's falling off. He's like green, and he does look a little scary because his mouth is sewn shut. He is a green zombie, but he's not like, it's not gross. And And I just want to be very clear here. Like, I do not believe that you should protect children from scary things. I
understand.
I think you do need to tell kids scary stories. I think they do need to see scary stuff. Anyone who's trying to shield their child from scary things is just, in my personal opinion, is just going to create more problems down the road.
100%.
The earlier you can slowly start to introduce them to things that they can handle and be there with them and talk them through it, I think it really helps their emotional development, because the world can be a scary place.
Yep.
And so fiction is a good way to explore and deal and learn to confront those emotions and deal with them before they have to actually deal with it in real life. I mean, sadly, some kids have to deal with very scary situations very early in life. And if you've worked them through their emotions through fiction, then they're better equipped to deal with it. So I'm absolutely not saying that you should not show your kids anything scary. I'm just, there's just an age appropriateness. And there's also just, as a parent, like, what do you really feel like dealing with today?
Sure.
I had no problem showing him Wizard of Oz, knowing that he might have nightmares for the next week that I would have to deal with. I was fine.
Sure.
But, if it had been a rough week at the job and whatnot, I would have just skipped on it.
Yep, makes sense. It's sometimes difficult for me because I ate this stuff up when I was a kid. And
Me too.
I want to share it with younger people like my niece and nephew. They're just not into it. Like, they're just not. My niece has really gotten into Halloween. She loves the spirit of Halloween, and she loves the spooky stuff, but she's not interested in watching a scary movie. That's just a step too far.
Now that you mention it, I mean, this is what I love about Halloween, right? Is that we've talked about it before. It's got a little something for everybody. It can be cute, it can be scary, but you're exposed to all of it, right? No matter what. Like, you're going to see some scary as well as some cute if you're out and about and you're putting a costume together and you're going to Halloween parties, you're having Halloween at school, you're watching Halloween movies, no matter what age you are. And that's what's awesome, actually, about Halloween, is that I feel like it itself is a good gateway for my son into the scary, the horror, kind of the scarier side of life and horror, and to some extent death. Skeletons, skulls.
Sure.
You're talking about this stuff, scary things. He made like a really spooky eyes that he calls spooky eyes, which would be the kind of thing, if he saw them, I think he would be scared about. But it's a little decoration he made, and it is creepy. But he wanted to put it up on the wall. He's gotten over that in a way, So it's in that case, this movie again is like that too. The monsters that are pursuing the kids are not the only monsters you're going to see in this movie. The parents are dressed like monsters. There's a whole parties full of monsters. The kids are dressing like monsters, and so it's so Halloween.
Yeah, we're already running over time, but I know so many things that I just want to say.
Let's keep going. It's fine.
The party. Of course, the witches chase the kids around. It's established that they can go to the cemetery and be relatively safe there because it's sacred ground, and the kids can't go there. The witches can't walk on sacred ground. I love everything about it. I love the set design. Like, the cemetery doesn't look real, but it looks like a perfect Halloween cemetery.
Yeah.
With these decrepit trees and these old tombstones. And
it's stylized almost like a cartoon, just like their house is. Yeah, it's really charming.
The whole movie is cartoonish.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that about it. Well, the zombie comes and he's great. He's chasing them around. I love that, he's ordered by Winnie the kids have the book, so he's supposed to get the book while the witches go and look for children or whatever. But ultimately it turns out that he hates Winnie Sanderson, and he's not a bad zombie, he's a good zombie. And it's so cute because the second that it's revealed that he's a good zombie, Thora Birch runs up to him and says, "Hi, Billy." And they're best friends. They're immediately best friends, and it's adorable.
Yeah.
And he protects her, and he helps the kids in the end to fight the witches. It's so cute.
It's cute. I don't know if you know anything about this, the backstory, but I'm really impressed because the witches can't stand on that sacred ground, but they can float above it on their brooms. And so a lot of the scenes, in fact, many of the scenes in this movie involve the witches sort of hovering there on their brooms. The effects are great. I mean,
oh my
this
gosh.
is 1993. There was CG. There's a little bit of CG in this movie, but not enough to do that. And it's just, it looks so good, and they're just so acrobatic on those brooms, and I can't even imagine the rig that was set up.
I know.
To make that happen, and they're just so natural on it. It's so good for its time, especially.
Some of those shots were done with stunt people, but the actresses did a lot of it themselves, and it was harnesses that they were in. And it looks so good. Like, again, just practical effects. Even in the new movie, there's clearly more movie magic going on behind it, and I kind of missed some of the flying harness effects because they just look great. It looks real. There's only one place, I didn't notice it. I read in the trivia that there is a place that you can see the wires on Mary's broom in one place. But other than that, I didn't see anything that made it look anything less than magic.
I was looking.
And I read that it must have been good special effects because Sarah Jessica Parker was so comfortable in her harness that she wouldn't even ask to be taken down when they would take breaks. She just kept a copy of the New York Times under her dress and would pull it out and read it.
Oh my gosh.
Just hanging there in the harness.
That's hilarious.
Oh gosh, it just reading things like this. I love to read these behind the scene things because reading things like that makes me so jealous. I want to make a movie with big effects and be flown around. So cool. All right, well, so there's that. There are two big parts that I wanted to talk about that we haven't yet. The first one is when they're looking for children and they end up a man comes out dressed as Satan and shouts to the trick-or-treaters who are all around them.
What kind of costumes are these? It's the Sanderson sisters, right?
That's your son.
Haven't seen you for centuries. But what the heck? Why don't you come in? Come into the non-smoking section. Come on, don't step on my tail.
And it's Gary Marshall and his wife, played by his sister Penny Marshall. And this scene, it could stand alone. Like, this could just be like a short. Like, it's so funny. You have to know, I mean, young people, if you're listening to this and you have no idea who Gary and Penny Marshall are, they're both actors and both directors. They are characters just in and of themselves. They don't have to act. They look kind of funny. They talk kind of funny, but they are just absolutely hysterical.
My three favorite witches.
Are you broads a little old to be trick-or-treating?
We'll be younger in the morning.
Yeah, sure. Me too.
And this whole scene, the whole scene is just a series of gags. Like when he walks into the kitchen and thinks it's a torture chamber. Mary is watching TV and sees that real life commercial from the 90s with the baby like running around in a like a walker type thing. And she is just, it's hilarious, her reaction to it. And Sarah is hitting on that Gary Marshall is the devil, and then Penny Marshall like comes to kick them out, and oh my god, she says to Sarah Jessica Parker, "Okay, tart face, take your Clark bar and get out of here." And then they try to stand up to the wife, and she's not at all scared of them, and she sicks her little tiny dog on them, and they're terrified by it because it's wearing like costume wings and horns like it's a little demon dog. And that was Kathy Najimy's actual dog in that scene.
That's funny.
But that scene was hilarious. And then the icing on the cake is the Halloween party at Town Hall.
I said this is all right up Craig's alley when I was watching.
Oh my god, like, it's wonderful. First of all, they go in there and these townspeople are dressed to the nines, like amazing costumes. This movie had a pretty low budget. It was not expected to be a blockbuster, so they didn't throw a ton of money at it. And so the costume department didn't have a lot of money. But it was Disney. So they had access to the costume closet from Disney movies past.
Yeah.
And so they just went in there and raided those closets. And so these costumes are amazing. They're gorgeous. Everybody looks great. There's a band dressed up like skeletons with skeleton makeup on who look fantastic. I have no idea who the singer was, but he's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think he's singing It's Witchcraft when they first come in, and they're trying to convince everybody that the Sanderson sisters are real and they're coming, and their parents don't believe them. And the Sanderson sisters arrive, and the song changes to I Put a Spell on You, and there's a close-up on Bette Midler's face where you can see she's listening to it and she's hearing the words. And then Max jumps up on the stage and like wrenches the microphone out of the singer's hand.
Your kids are in danger. 300 years ago, the Sanderson sisters bewitched people. Now they've returned from their grave. Hey, man, I'm serious. It's not a joke.
All right, this has gone far enough.
I know this sounds dumb, but they're here tonight. They're right over there.
Wow.
Thank you, Max, for that marvelous introduction.
And they start singing I Put a Spell on You, but it becomes a real spell. And they put their own chants into it, and the lyrics are tailored to them. Bette Midler takes credit for writing one of the lyrics. There's a line, "'Cause of all the witches working, I'm the worst," which is a great line. And she takes credit for that. But again, Bette Midler is a legend, and this performance is iconic. It's iconic. Period. Drag queens love this stuff. Like Halloween, I can't tell you how many social media posts and mainstream media things I see. This is drag material, 100%. And their performance is great. Every time we watch it, it's so funny. Every time we watch it, Alan is so excited at this part. And then I'm lowering my voice because I think he can hear me. And then as soon as it's over, he always says, "We have to watch that again." And then he rewinds it and we watch it again. It's so good. It is so good.
It is.
And so then they end up in the cemetery. Dani gets in trouble because she crawled out of her safety hole. So the witch, when he gets her, there was a whole other part that we skipped about how they brewed the whole potion, but then Max foiled their plans and spilled it, and they only had enough left for one kid. And Sarah and Mary are both like, we've got a whole bunch of kids here, because Sarah had sang her beautiful Tempt the Children song, which I also love. And so all the kids from Salem had gone to their house. So they had all these kids at their disposal, but Mary is super mad because Dani called her ugly. So she wants not only to regain her youth and live forever, but she wants her revenge. So stupid decision. They go after the kids on the run instead of taking one of the hundreds of kids just standing in a trance around the house. But anyway, so they end up in the cemetery, and there's lots of fun, like, confrontation with the witches. They're, like, charging them on their brooms, and Allison's throwing salt in Sarah Jessica Parker's face, which makes her, like, do acrobatic flips through the air and all kinds of stuff. Eventually, when he gets Dani, she's got the potion. She's about to make her drink it, but Binks the cat jumps on her. Mary drops the potion, Max catches it, and he drinks it so that Winnie will have to take him and not Dani. And she comes down and lets Dani off the broom, which I thought was polite of her, instead of just, like, you know, throwing her off and letting her die or whatever. Mm-hmm. But she comes down and she says, "What a fool to sacrifice your own life for your sisters." And it is a throwaway line, in this movie, 30 years later, it is a big deal in the second movie.
Interesting.
So anyway, she starts sucking Mac's life force, but the sun comes up and the two sisters blow up, die, but in a cute way. Like they say they're like,
oops.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah.
And then they blow up and glitter in their colors. And Winnie gets knocked to the ground with Max. And she stands up and she's still holding him up by his collar. She's trying to suck his life force. But she failed to remember that she's now on hallowed ground. So from the feet up, she starts to turn to stone, and she turns into a big stone statue of herself. And then the statue blows up. Everybody celebrates in front of the Friends fountain. But Billy just goes back to sleep. He just goes back to his grave and goes back to sleep. Good night, Billy. Then Binks is dead, and Dani's really sad. But it's okay, because his spirit has been freed of the curse, and in astral form, he's reunited with his sister, and they walk off through like a heavenly gate. And that's the end. And then there's like some caps with the parents getting out of the dance finally. We already talked about that. And the bullies still being caged in the sister's house, and the book opening its eye one last time, and then that's the end. Oh, dude. I apologize for totally stealing the spotlight on this one.
This is obviously a favorite of yours. There's been times when I've said, once we've done this movie, the podcast can end because Craig is satisfied. I feel like maybe we've hit another one of those moments. What else is out there that you're just dying to do?
I don't know. I didn't realize, because again, like we've tossed it around, like, maybe. Is it really what we do? I don't know. But this year, because somebody outside of us suggested it, and it's Halloween, and we've done lots of Halloween movies, but yeah, it is. It's a favorite. I gleefully watch it every year, at least once. It's something that I can enjoy with everybody. My sister loves it. Her kids love it, even though they're not into really spooky stuff. Alan loves it. My kids at school are aware of it. It's one of the few pop culture references that I can make that they even get.
Well, they're going to be more aware of it now too with the sequel coming out. I'm sure it's bringing renewed interest onto the original, and
yeah.
And like we said, it stands the test of time, so I don't think any kid's going to look at the original and say, oh, this is like an old movie. They're not going to feel that way.
Right. Right. And honestly, folks out there, if you liked the first one, you're going to like the second one. Give it a chance. It starts out a little goofy, but it's great. I was nervous, because you love a movie like this, and there's the part of you that wants a sequel, but then you also know that sequels often don't live up to the original, and so sometimes you're left disappointed and almost wishing that they hadn't messed with what you loved. And I don't feel that way about this one at all. I think that it is an excellent companion piece to the original. I'm confident that it will become part of our yearly ritual as well. We're going to watch both of them every year.
back to back.
Until we're dead.
Hilarious.
Oh, man. All right. Well, thank you, audience, for indulging me in my excessive
Hocus Pocus obsession.
Yeah. If you enjoyed this episode and are new to the podcast, we have literally hundreds of back episodes that you can find on virtually any platform that you can find podcasts on. We do also have a Patreon page if you'd like to be able to access some exclusive content, some mini-sodes, personal interview about how we got started doing this, that type of stuff. That is available to you. And if you, like me, would like to gush about Hocus Pocus, please feel free to drop a comment in any one of our social media pages, or you can PM us if it's private. Until next time, I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.